Well, welcome viewers. I want to talk about faithfulness. Remaining faithful to somebody who is a covert narcissist. And let me start by saying, covert narcissism is not loud arrogance. It's fragile superiority wrapped in victimhood, martyrdom, or quiet resentment. The ego is still central. It's just dressed in wounded humility. Now here's the consequences. Remaining faithful to a covert narcissist. Long-term consequence overview. Number 1. Slow identity erosion. At first, A, you accommodate their sensitivities. At first, B, you reassure them constantly. And at first, C, you smooth over conflicts. Then, over time, A, your preferences shrink. B, your needs feel too much, feel that they're unjustifiable. And C, you edit yourself before speaking. You check what you're going to say so that you don't rock the apple cart. That's how they get you. You don't notice it happening because there's no dramatic explosion. It's gradual. It's like paint fading. And the consequence is you lose a stable sense of self by focusing so heavily on the relationship with the covert narcissist. You lose a stable sense of self. Then point number 2, you go into emotional exhaustion without visible abuse. Let me say that again. You go into emotional exhaustion without visible abuse. Covert narcissists rely particularly on flying under the radar. They rarely rage openly. Instead, A, they go chronic guilt induction. They'll try and induct you with guilt, and they'll do it with chronic determination. Then B, they'll go into silent withdrawal when displeased. Now this is punishing. Silent withdrawal is one of the most punishing forms of relationship abuse that is engaged or is output. C, subtle blame shifting. Instead of taking the accountability upon themselves, they're going to twist the narrative so that the blame shifts to you. And D, I guess I'm just the bad one. They'll surrender. It'll be a false surrender to them being the problem. But that'll be to put you in a position where you go, hang on, no, it's me. You know, it's very clever how it's done. So you become the emotional regulator in the relationship. You're regulating the feelings of both of you. You're living two lives. And the consequence, you become hypervigilant. Anxiety is going to be there, of course. And constant scanning of mood shifts. You're constantly, like a radar looking for ships and planes, scanning for feelings and emotions that are going to what you believe cause damage or upset or harm to the relationship or the person that you're with. So you live in preemptive repair mode. You constantly got the mop and the bucket or the band-aids and whatnot in the emotional realm, and you're patching and fixing, and it's just constant, run you into the ground stuff. Then point number 3, being faithful in a covert narcissistic relationship. Inverted responsibility. They rarely take clear accountability. Instead, you apologize first, and you'll be aware that you're doing it, but it's like you're standing in a fog or a shadow, and you just do it, and then you realize, should I have really done that? Then B, you explain your intentions, but you don't need to, and you're sort of saying to yourself, gee, should I be really? And the truth of the fact of the matter is, no, you don't need to explain your intentions. And then C, you defend yourself against distortions. And there's going to be plenty of those. I can remember in a relationship I had, it was not just covert narcissism, it was overt, but it was clearly manifesting, had been going on for decades. Covert emotional incestual situation that I'd walked into, and of course covert emotional incest will hide and then it will manifest over time if in my case the child realises that the mother's got a form of supply that she's putting more value into than the child. And some of the distortions that the child was making up were absolutely extreme and imaginary beyond comprehension. But you've got to defend yourself against these distortions. Even if it means saying nothing, don't buy into them. And then eventually you start assuming you're the destabilizing force. You're the one causing the problems. You're just going along, managing all this, and then you start to think, shivers, I must have some serious problems. And this is where you'll hear people say, oh no, he's not right in the head, or the Jehovah Witnesses like to use the term mentally diseased, and I think there should be a law against that, or you're mental, or these kind of spear throwing words that wound and maim. And the consequences of this are cognitive confusion, self-doubt, and erosion of internal trust. You begin to wonder, why am I reacting like this? I know I shouldn't be. But remember, you're now regulating not just yourself, which is going into tilt, but a person that can't be regulated because they run on drama, toxicity, and irregulated ways of living because they get bored otherwise. Then point number 4, isolation through narrative framing. They're framing the narrative, and you have to live within the boundaries of that frame, like a picture. Isolation through narrative framing. Covert narcissists may not forbid relationships outright. They reframe them. A, your friend doesn't like me. Now that's to try and encourage you to withdraw from your friend. B, your family disrespects me. Yes, that's their way of trying to make you start to withdraw from your family. And it's accumulating attention for them. Number 3, I feel unsafe around them. And that's a real heavy blow, because now if that person feels unsafe because you're regulating both relationships, particularly the other person and how they feel, now you're in a situation where if they feel unsafe, well, you've got to make them safe, and that could be not seeing your friends anymore, shunning your family, leaving your job. There's all sorts of things. You become the carer of this person. And then you begin withdrawing to reduce tension, because you don't want tension between you and the person that you're trying to have the relationship with, the covert narcissist. And this is the consequence. Shrinking your support network. and you have an increased dependency on this dysfunctional person. So while you're shrinking, and this is the motive behind it, all the people you rely on for encouragement and advice, unbiased, unjudgmental advice, just friendship, maybe sports and all the rest of it, that's shrinking. While your dependency as the carer really, see, when you think about it, the carer doesn't depend on the person that they're caring for. But this is how twisted covert narcissism is. The carer not only cares for the dysfunctional person and works within that framework, but they also put that person in the place of the carer. So they think that the covert narcissism is caring for them, but they're actually destroying you micro-incrementally, bit by bit, while you're caring for them. It's not co-mutual caring. It's not co-mutual, healthy, integrated relationship. It's more or less the devil leading you to your own destruction. And then isolation rarely looks like a cage. It looks like conflict avoidance. So as you're isolating, you're actually avoiding the things that are starting to, the red lights that are starting to come up in your mind that you need to face. But you're dodging them. Then it goes at number 5 into chronic guilt conditioning. They operate through subtle moral leverage. A, like sacrifice language. Another subtle moral leverage is B, victim positioning. They position themselves as the victim. They use sacrifice language. And C, another subtle moral leverage is emotional fragility cues. So it's the house of cards, and it's always falling, it's always tottering, it's always collapsing. It's the dominoes. If one falls, they all fall, and it just goes on and on and on. And you remain faithful, not because of joy, but because leaving feels cruel. You start to think that you're a cruel person, that you're now a puppet. You're a complete and utter puppet in the hands of the enemy, because there's nothing good that's going to come out of this after this point. The consequence is trauma bonding dynamics. In other words, now they've got you in a state where you go into trauma if they're threatening to leave or you think the relationship's going to crack, and you feel responsible for their emotional survival. You've totally abandoned yours. And this goes on and deteriorates. It could be over periods of decades. Then point number 6, and you didn't realize this was happening, but you're actually emotionally starving. Emotional starvation. Affection and validation are inconsistent. Approval is conditional. But approval is conditional A, when you align. Approval is conditional B, when you prioritize them. Approval is conditional when you absorb blame. You've got to take the blame. And you work for warmth. You've got to earn it, which is terrible. And the consequence of all this is attachment instability, increased dependency on small moments of approval. So whilst the affection and the care and the emotional warmth is disintegrating, to get the scraps and the crumbs, you're trying harder. So while they're backing out and detaching and becoming cruel, you're becoming warmer and doing more to try and keep the small amount of supply continuing, in a hope that it'll go back to the way it was when you first met. But that's not how covert narcissism works. It's intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement. and it's neurologically powerful. Once it gets a hold on you, this emotional starvation, the neurological effect is so powerful that you don't realize you're starving, and you emotionally and all the rest of it, and you don't realize they're detaching. Then, number 7, suppressed anger. Suppressed anger is you eventually feel resentment, and I can vouch for that. But expressing anger triggers withdrawal. Expressing anger triggers injury display. And suppressing anger triggers counter accusations, so you start pushing back. And what's happening now is that's indicating to the covert narcissist, be it female or male, that they're coming onto the radar, that you're starting to, through the trauma and through the stress, by nature, through the pain, you're starting to ask questions, and this is going to send the narcissist into flight or fight. And when they flight, they're trying to reinvigorate the trauma bond, so that you go back into surrender and back into your frame, the frame that they've made for you, and comply. It's cult-like, isn't it? It's how cult works. And so you suppress it. The consequences are somatic stress, fatigue, headaches, gastro symptoms, and sleep disruption. The body keeps score even when the mouth stays polite. And so you move then into existential shrinking. Point number 8. Existential shrinking. Years in, you may notice, you're way in now, you're wasting years. Years in, you may notice, A, dreams postponed indefinitely. You may notice, B, your personality is completely flattened. You may notice, C, reduced spontaneity. Now you're becoming passive. You've been running around like a chook with its head cut off, and now all of a sudden you're just starting to lose interest. And then you may notice, D, loss of ambition. Your hobbies, the things that matter, they start to completely have no value at all. And remaining faithful becomes an identity itself. Your whole identity now is to remain faithful to basically what can only be called a monster. And the consequence, believe it or not, midlife crisis is not from age, viewers, but from unlived self. You're not living as yourself anymore. That's midlife crisis. That's life crisis. When you've unlived, you're not living as yourself anymore. You're now the puppet, and the person is the master. And so the final stage, the final risk, if this continues long term without boundaries, is you may experience a complex anxiety patterns. And what they mean by complex is it's complicated because you can't tell whether you're anxious or not. People are noticing it. Excuse me, viewers. You can't work out where the anxiety is coming from, but it's straight in front of you. It's so complex that it's not rational anymore. You may experience depression. And the good sign of depression is the abandonment of hobbies or any expectation or hope that you will be doing them or carrying them out. Yeah, depression more or less just leaves you in a heap. You may experience C, identity diffusion. Identity diffusion. The wick just does not light anymore. You're just there, and that's it. And then you may experience D, difficulty making independent decisions. You have to rely on your decisions around this person, because if the person don't like your decisions, that's going to start more trouble. And this is the trouble that you've worked so hard towards to prevent. But it's like standing on a top of a fence. It could fall at any time, not because you're weak, but because chronic emotional asymmetry rewires perception. Your perception's constantly being rewired by this person. There's no continuum. If they look like you're becoming stable, they're going to trip something for you to lose that stability again. And this is the important nuance, viewers. Not every insecure or quiet partner is a covert narcissist. Pattern makers include, number 1A, persistent lack of accountability. Right? These are the key things that you need to look out for if you want to spot a situation where you're engaging with a covert narcissist. A, persistent lack of accountability. B, chronic victim stance. They're just going to hold that position that they're the victim, and you can or could be contributing to that problem. C, empathy that disappears under criticism. And D, control disguised as fragility. So if someone shows growth, reflection and accountability, you're dealing with insecurity, not narcissism. And if this question connects to your real life, then this isn't theoretical. And staying faithful at the cost of psychological disintegration isn't virtue. It's self-erasure. Loyalty without reciprocity becomes self-abandonment. And you deserve better than disappearing slowly, don't you? Loyalty without reciprocity becomes self-abandonment, and you deserve better than disappearing slowly. I'm Dr. WAU, and I'll see you on the next one.